control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthology with host Mark. Today we are covering starting the third and final season of Night Gallery with episode 1 from that season. Now, just a bit of background, there was some interesting stuff going on in the Night Gallery universe at this time. Once season 2 had finished, the network who broadcast decided they wanted to change the format. They wanted the show to be punchier from the outset, and they also wanted it to be kind of scary or suspenseful right from the start, rather than having a slow build. They changed the format. They wanted a format change to what not necessarily one story, but certainly a shorter format, 25 minutes rather than an hour. Which really mostly meant most of these episodes were a single story, though there are a few episodes where there are two stories, and I think usually a very short one and a longer one in those cases. This created a lot of issues. They also wanted to change the time slot, which meant it wasn't as good as before. And essentially, it was almost like Mannix was the thing which was like a detective show that this Night Gallery competed against, was kind of what they were trying to go for. And someone made the point, and I can't remember who, in one of these articles I read about this, that they were instead of trying to be different from the competing show, they wanted to try and compete with it, which is probably unwise. It was still produced by Jack Laird. As soon as Rod Serling got wind of this, he really wanted out and offered to make it as easy as possible. So, just call it Night Gallery, or if you want a different host, we can do that. I'm all right with that. No problems at all. He basically wanted his name off of it. However, he was contractually bound, and the studio producing the show wanted his name. His name was prestige, so they wanted it, even though they didn't seem to want any other input from him, it appears. But that didn't happen. So Rod Serling does still sort of open and somewhat mostly open these episodes. But it's a different vibe. There's different credits. They use different music. The look of it is similar to the season 1 and 2 opening credits, but not quite the same. Fading pictures and statues and so on, overlaying each other, so that kind of thing. But the music was different, and the thrust was different. So they were going from a punchy from the beginning kind of vibe, which Rod Serling felt was contrary to building a decent stories. He made the point that some of their best shows were not like, some of their best stories and episodes were not like that at all, and this would be contrary to what they've done in the past. However, the pressure was on. They also cut the budgets significantly because it was a shorter show. So essentially they halved the budget because it was half the length. However, that did mean the set designer and so on didn't have the sort of luxury to sort of think about, okay, we can use this set across several stories, or we can shift this bit of budget. So this story, which is needs much more higher level of input of cash, and then the low one can be, slightly made on the cheap without compromising too much. So there was all sorts of issues going on, and apparently the final season is not very good, and I don't think I've seen it, so I can't comment on it. However, this first episode was pretty decent. Actually, I quite liked it, so I don't think things had slipped into sort of any terrible at this point, but we'll see as we go on. I may have a different opinion of the episodes So there we go. So this first episode of season 3 was called Return of the Sorcerer. The teleplay was written by Halstead Wells, name I don't recognise, based on a story by Clark Ashton Smith, which is a name I do recognise. He's done some of the previous ones. Some of the previous stories have been based on his short stories, and directed by Jenna Schwartz, who's directed some great episodes of The Night Gallery, so there is that. The other thing going for it is there's only 3 leads really in this, and they're all very, very solid, and 2 of them you will know the name of. Vincent Price plays John Carby. Vincent Price is always terrific, hamming it up in a Dr. Phibe style here, really, and that's fine. Another character called Noel Evans. Bill Bixby, was the Magician and the Incredible Hulk, underplaying it a bit and quite well. And then finally there's another character called Fern, played by Tisha Sterling, who's decent. She, the role, the way it's written, she does very well. She's got quite striking blue eyes, and they come across in this. But there's some really weird, absurdist kind of elements to this episode that I quite like. Essentially, someone's been advertising for a translator of Arabic, and Bill Bixby as Noel Evans turns up, very mild man, and John Carby is much more overblown, and it looks like they're not going to get along. But then Noel Evans asks, what's the salary? And it's $750. Quite a lot of money in them days. Not bad now, I guess. I don't really know. It sounds pretty good for that back then. And then he also shows his assistant Fern, who seems to be a bit flaky and strung out a little. And basically, we find out that Carby's been studying sort of demonology and sorcery. He's got a source book for some spells, which is in Latin, but he's got an older book based on Arabic, which he has had previous people come in to translate, and they've all left and refused. Carby is kind of interesting. He says, how do you know I won't leave? But, there's a bit to and fro. Price is overblown as ever, really wonderful, actually. And essentially, he does get to a part where a passage says, whoever translates this text, I'm going to read this verbatim from, I've got a book called Rod Serling's Night Gallery and After Hours Tour by Scott Skelton and Jim Benson, which is, I find, a really useful resource. And this is what they quote: "May he who reveals this secret be flayed slowly over burning coals and then thoroughly dismembered." This particular... And then he basically doesn't want to continue, but Vincent Price pulls a gun on him and kind of forces him to continue reading. And the message is, there's that bit. Anyone who translates this, it will be flayed and dismembered. And he also mentions about a wizard who, if he understands these texts, even if he's dismembered, there's a lot of use of dismembered in this, will have the power to still wield spells. Carby gets freaked out by this, and then Fern reveals he killed his own twin brother and dismembered him and chopped him up. So that's why he's kind of freaked out, because it reveals that the wizard's power can overcome that. Also, there's quite an interesting sort of dinner with them, where there's a fourth person there who's a black goat. Interesting black goat. And apparently it took a while to train that goat to sit at a chair at a table, but the goat kind of got used to it, and because goats apparently have a hard time sitting like that, but the goat got used to it. But it's kind of interesting. It kind of made me think of The Witch, Black Phillip in The Witch. It kind of had that vibe. And essentially, Vincent Price's brother, who is Vincent Price, gets resurrected, as it were, pulls his own pieces together, and there's a lots of slithering sounds that are really bothering Vincent Price. No one else can seem to hear, so it's got a touch of Telltale Heart about it too. And essentially, he then reveals that he believes Fern is the mastermind here. Carby reveals she's the one who wants to know the spells and stuff like this. And essentially, the brothers, I don't know, they kind of disappear from the scene, but Fern mentions they are now together, fragmented but together. So it does look like she's in charge now. However, she has made overtures towards Bill Bixby's character, advances, and he's not averse. She's quite an attractive woman. He's not averse, and he kind of leads her from the room. And as he leaves her, he says, but in the passage it said, "I will suffer from burning and dismemberment." is there anything in that? And she just smiles at him and leads him upstairs, kind of thing. Very fun. Very fun. Not bad at all. I quite liked it. There was no real... It was just a weird set of scenes, and there's a really great set design as well. They really went to town in a kind of Hammer way with the set design, and it's got a kind of surreal quality to it, this one. I quite liked it. And reading up further on the notes, everyone was kind of taken with how well the goat behaved, which is kind of funny. And this is a kind of definitely a fun, tongue-in-cheek kind of story. And I appreciated it. I thought it was pretty decent. I'd never seen it before. And, 25 minutes, why not? Good fun, this. So, yes, a big recommend for me for this episode. Return of the Sorcerer is title. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to wind it up there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
There's nobody here but us chickens.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to